Today on Notsam Wrestling, the king and queen of the ring have been crowned, and with them, a picture of what WWE this summer is going to look like. MJF, the Wolf of Wrestling, is back in AEW. Cody Rhodes and The Rock are back in the news. And what's going on with Uncle Howdy? This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to 501. And this just in. Wrestling fans everywhere, it's a good time. Here's what I've gathered. Here's what I've gathered from this weekend. Here's what I've gathered from the weeks leading up to this weekend, what we've got headed into the summer. I really feel like that post-WrestleMania season where, the dust is kind of settling and everything is kind of evening out, those massive stories that are a part of WrestleMania have concluded. And now we just have to figure out where the pieces are left. That's that post-WrestleMania season, and it's natural. But I feel like summer officially begins now. And I feel like this summer, the summer of 2024, we're left in a situation where two different North American, global, but based in North America, wrestling promotions are fighting for our attention, tooth and nail, at a time when there are more wrestling fans, quote unquote, more people with their eyeballs on wrestling than there have been in at least 20 years. And at a time when there are more television outlets that are willing to pay big money for professional wrestling. And what that means is, as fans, we get to sit back and watch as these behemoths of sports entertainment fight over who can entertain us better. And boy, do we benefit. It was a busy weekend. It started with King of the Ring. Of course, King of the Ring going down on Saturday afternoon. We went over the entire premium live event. I did a King of the Ring immediate reaction show that was up on the podcast feed as well as on the YouTube channel. That went up on Saturday evening. After I watched the show and did all that, I also did a special edition episode of The Bump, kind of going, match by match with everything that happened on the show. But I think, when you look at it, to me anyway, the biggest news in terms of long-term discussion are that Gunther is the King of the Ring. And I feel like on the way to King of the Ring, there was a lot of conversation, at least on my part, there was a lot of conversation. You remember last week, I advocated for the idea of Jey Uso beating Gunther. And I think there were a lot of people watching Raw that were actually surprised and were sounding off on social media about the decision to have Gunther beat Jey Uso. This King of the Ring tournament was all about teasing you with something that you're not quite going to get. The idea that we might get Gunther versus Ilya. The idea that we might get Jey finally winning the big one. These ideas are not happening. But what did happen was, leading up to the King of the Ring, Triple H makes the announcement the day before that he didn't want to say it while the tournament was happening, but the winner of the King of the Ring tournament and the Queen of the Ring tournament will both go on to face the world champion of their brand at this year's SummerSlam. That same week, the announcement was made that in 2026, we don't know about 2025 yet, but in 2026, SummerSlam is going to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it's going to be 2 nights in the stadium. Now, we don't know if SummerSlam in 2025 is going to be 2 nights, but I would imagine Minneapolis gets that first crack at a 2-night SummerSlam. But what it does tell us, rule number 2 is speculate wildly. So we can just about that little fact, we can talk and talk and talk. And one of the conversations amongst fans has been, do we need another 2-night show? I think that nobody would argue that WrestleMania as a 2-night show is far better than WrestleMania where it was immediately before it became a 2-night show. If you want to go back to a 1-night, 2-hour and 45-minute WrestleMania, that's a different conversation. But I'm talking about WrestleMania 35 that went about 17 hours in a cold MetLife Stadium where the buses stopped running by the time the show was over. That was too long. And it makes it really difficult. It was the same problem WWE had for a long time with the Hall of Fame, where there were years where the speeches would be so long that the headliner would go on last, and by the time you got to the headliner, nobody was left in the audience. So you have to do something about it. You have to make sure that the show moves along. That's not a problem WWE has anymore. With WrestleMania, it's like, yeah, WrestleMania 35. The moment of the night is Becky Lynch becoming Becky Two Belts and main eventing with Charlotte and with Ronda Rousey for the first time, an all-female WrestleMania main event. But the other thing fans remember is having to wait many hours for that main event. It becomes unfair to the performer at that point. It's a whole new layer of pressure that they have to that's put on them, as well as for fans. I think that everybody is happier that we've got these two massive nights of WrestleMania, and I feel like since that move has been made, WrestleMania has only been better. If you look at WrestleMania 38, 39, and 40, 3 in a row that have not missed in terms of overall, man, that was a great show. That was 2 nights. That was an awesome weekend of wrestling. So if that can be maintained, I don't think there's any discussion. If you're telling me as fun as WrestleMania weekend is, I can get that twice, you can deliver me another WrestleMania weekend and you could do it in August, then give it to me. Don't stretch, but if you can give me what you give me in April, in August, I'm here for it. I'm in Minneapolis. This is going to be great. But regardless of all that, you see a heightened importance, even more so than usual, on SummerSlam. SummerSlam has always been, I think, the second biggest show of the year. You could argue that it's the Royal Rumble. But really, the Royal Rumble is only as big as it is in the context of WrestleMania. Royal Rumble is a big show because it kicks into gear WrestleMania season. And because the minute that 30-person over-the-top rope Royal Rumble match is over, we're talking about the main event of WrestleMania. Royal Rumble is huge in the context of WrestleMania. WrestleMania is huge on its own. I think from that perspective, SummerSlam has always been looked at as the second biggest show of the year. But I think that WWE, it seems like, is actively going, okay, all of our premium live events are big. But these are more of the, like I said before, this is a 3-hour show. It's in an arena. It's now an international show, but it's a different show. Our pillar shows are going to be massive, can't miss moment shows. And that's what SummerSlam becomes. So with King of the Ring and Queen of the Ring resulting in a potential SummerSlam main event, at least a SummerSlam championship match, you start building out what SummerSlam is going to look like. I think that's why a lot of people thought Randy Orton was going to beat Gunther. It didn't happen. Gunther beat Randy Orton, except somehow he did it with the magic of not having Randy's shoulders on the mat. I was very pleased that, as I'm watching King of the Ring, I see Gunther, and it's this moment of like, because you watch this great match with Randy Orton and Gunther, this match that completely lives up to the hype of what that can be. And then at the very end, everybody can see the shoulders aren't on the mat. So what did they do? Instead of just kind of brushing it under the carpet and going, well, it is what it is, whatever, we're moving forward. Immediately, Triple H addresses it. He goes on TV. They film a web exclusive video that they put up on the WWE's YouTube channel within an hour of that show going off the air, where Triple H says, yeah, I didn't see it while I was out there, but it certainly happened. I heard everybody talking about it, and it'll be addressed. Was kind of, it felt like what he was saying was, we will run this back. Gunther is your King of the Ring. Gunther won the tournament. But I think Randy Orton and Gunther are both going to want to have that match again. And I would imagine, it could happen on an episode of Raw, certainly. But I would imagine, why not? Like, what's the silver lining in this? It sucks that happened. It sucks that you have this great match that's the pinnacle of this tournament that was a great King of the Ring tournament. You talk about Bret the Hitman Hart. You go back to the 1993 King of the Ring tournament. What makes that tournament so special is how good. It was all in one night. but like Brett going through Razor, Mr. Perfect, and Bam Bam Bigelow. And all three were fantastic matches. They didn't all happen in one night. But if you go through Gunther specifically, if you go through his tournament matches, unbelievable, all of them. And for it to culminate like that, of course, it's going to be disappointing. What is the silver lining? The silver lining is, even with those two superstars on two separate brands, you can go to another pay-per-view and do Gunther versus Randy Orton, which is what I would hope happens, which is what I would do if the decision were mine to make. Do it at Clash at the Castle, Gunther versus Randy. You know what I mean? Now you've got Damian Priest versus Drew McIntyre. You've got Gunther versus Randy Orton, and it's not even about, like, you can, but I don't think you have to put the crown on the line. I don't think you have to put the SummerSlam match on the line. It is what it is. You know, I think it's just about doing things honorably. And ultimately, Gunther should win again. And it sucks because now Randy has to be beaten by Gunther twice. But as fans, we do get 2 Randy versus Gunther matches. And it leads me into my Gunther conversation because, as I said on the King of the Ring wrap-up show and a clip that I put out, I'm coming off of King of the Ring going, I'm ready for it. I'm ready for Gunther to be the World Heavyweight Champion. I'm ready for this story to be Gunther has the longest run of any Intercontinental Champion in history, 666 days. He goes to WrestleMania, he loses it. Sami Zayn gets the victory over Gunther. It elevates Sami Zayn. The 666-day reign did everything a reign like that should do. It elevates the next person who has it. And the person who carried the title for all that time still looks so much better than he did 666 days ago, to the point that people are like, yeah, he's your guy. I don't like fast title changes. If you look at the landscape of WWE, if you look at what's happened in WWE in the last, year, it doesn't seem like WWE is a place that's doing a lot of quick title changes anyway. I think that when you look at the idea that Gunther is getting the World Heavyweight Championship match as a Raw superstar at SummerSlam. Now, look, Gunther versus Cody would be amazing. Cody having to defend that undisputed championship after he finished the story, after it took him 2 years, but he beat Roman Reigns. And then he goes through AJ Styles, then he goes through Logan Paul, and now he's got to face Gunther at SummerSlam. It'd be great, but I don't know how much sense it would make. It would also, for Gunther to go like, well, I know I'm on Raw, but since I won the tournament, I'm going to go after Cody's title. Number one, it would make it so that King of the Ring and Royal Rumble had the same title. I mean, yeah, had the same, prize, I'll say. Right? I think the thing that makes Royal Rumble even bigger than King of the Ring is, number one, WrestleMania, not SummerSlam, and number two, you get to pick the champion as opposed to facing the champion on your brand. But it also would devalue the World Heavyweight Championship to an extent, because now you're like, are they ever going to pick the new belt? Cody didn't pick it. Gunther's not going to pick it. And I think that Damian Priest versus Gunther could be an interesting thing. I think we are going to get Damian Priest beating Drew McIntyre in Scotland. And the reason that I think that is because what better final blow for CM Punk than to cost Drew McIntyre the World Heavyweight Championship at the Clash at the Castle. That's the big, now CM Punk has done everything that he possibly can do to ruin things for Drew McIntyre, right? And when I look at it, it's like, yeah, if in a bubble, if Gunther is going to be challenging for the World Heavyweight Championship, I get the appeal of Drew McIntyre being that champion. But realistically, for Drew McIntyre, the SummerSlam match is CM Punk. If we are elevating CM Punk, SummerSlam, like we said we were elevating SummerSlam, the SummerSlam match is Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk. Drew McIntyre holding the title for 2 months and defending it against Gunther, as big of a match as that is not as big as Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk, a match that by then will be like at least 8 months in the making. You could argue maybe even more. I think that that's got to be your SummerSlam match. And if that's going to be your SummerSlam match, why not give Damian Priest this longer title reign so he's got the opportunity to be not just like a fluke, briefcase cash in, Money in the Bank holder, but a real champion who held the title from WrestleMania all the way to SummerSlam. And just as his reign is really getting established, just as we're recognizing, you know what, Damian Priest is the real deal, he's got the biggest challenge of his life. And that's the story going into SummerSlam. That Damian Priest was not supposed to be in the position that he was in. He cashed in the briefcase. But what he's done since cashing in the briefcase is he has proven that he is worthy to call himself the World Heavyweight Champion, that title belongs with him. And the last thing he's got to do to prove it is defend that title against Gunther, something that nobody would want to do. And Gunther, again, is that guy who comes in. He goes, I know you all have hope. You all have these grand aspirations for what Damian Priest is capable of. But what do? I destroy hope. I bring him back down to reality, and I win the championship. And to me, that's exactly what happens. Gunther beats Damian Priest. Gunther becomes the World Heavyweight Champion at SummerSlam. Because look at what's in front of him after that, right? After Gunther wins the World Heavyweight Championship at SummerSlam, not only will Damian Priest at some point want to have a rematch, and I'm gonna get to it later in the show as to how Damian Priest would be considered kind of a good guy by a SummerSlam, but especially in this altercation with Gunther. But as you look forward, it's like, what's going to happen between Drew McIntyre and CM Punk? The winner of that match is obviously going to be asking for a title match, right? So now, theoretically, at Bash in Berlin or wherever you want to have it, coming off of SummerSlam, you could do Gunther versus CM Punk. You can do Gunther versus Drew McIntyre with Gunther defending. You can do triple threat, Gunther, CM Punk, Drew McIntyre. But I mean, how appealing is that? Gunther versus CM Punk? At some point, Seth Rollins is going to come back. And while, Seth Rollins is going to say, last time you saw me, I was helping Cody. I'm a Raw superstar. Gunther's got my title. And we're going to have Seth Rollins, at some point when he gets back, challenging Gunther for the World Heavyweight title. What happens in July? Money in the Bank. What if Jey Uso wins the Money in the Bank briefcase? Now Gunther wins the title a month later at SummerSlam. You've got Gunther taking the title off Damian Priest, feuding with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. Seth Rollins is around the corner, and Jey Uso, who's never beaten Gunther but really wants to, is holding that briefcase waiting for Gunther to make a mistake. And what does Gunther want to do? He wants to hold the title, the World Heavyweight title, longer than he held the Intercontinental title. Does he have to beat Roman Reigns' record? I would love it. But technically, all he's got to do is beat Seth Rollins' record, and he's held that title the longest. A lot of stories to be told with Gunther holding that title. I mean, I think you can get to a place where Ludwig Kaiser is separating himself from Gunther and trying to get a shot at the World Heavyweight title. It's not going to work because it's Gunther. But I just think there's so much there with him. And, when we talk about Seth Rollins potentially coming back, right? I do think that there is a conversation to be had. And again, now you're talking about different brands. So there would have to be a way to do this. But Seth Rollins, who I believe was drafted to Raw, at some point, he and Cody Rhodes are going to cross paths again. And Cody's going to thank him. Cody's going to say, you were a man of your word. You were my shield. And Seth's going to say, yes, I was. But there is something I'd like in return. A shot at that. And I don't know if that happens before Seth tries to get his title back from then champion Gunther or after. But at some point, Seth Rollins wants a shot at Cody Rhodes. Now I know what you're thinking. if Cody Rhodes is still champion come WrestleMania next year? What if Seth Rollins wins the Royal Rumble? And now the WrestleMania main event is Seth Rollins versus Cody Rhodes, building a story from last year. And that's all well and good. But before we get attached to any story that we could build involving Cody Rhodes, the Royal Rumble, and WrestleMania, let's not forget who is looming in the background. The final boss, The Rock. Now, Brian Gewirtz, who has done this show before, who's, The Rock's writer, who's working with The Rock on this final boss run, he's been doing media a lot lately. He's done a couple of podcasts. I think they're helping promote the Who Killed WCW documentary that's coming out on Vice. But he's been talking about Cody Rhodes. And basically, we've gotten some back and forth in the podcast space, not on WWE television, but in the podcast space, where Brian Gewirtz has kind of talked behind the scenes. First, he's talked about the long-lost WrestleMania documentary and saying it's not just gone because The Rock is trying to approve every single scene. It's gone because it's turned into a much bigger project, which I believe, but I have no idea where it is. But more interesting than that, Gewirtz has kind of started to shed some light on the original WrestleMania plan. And he has said that if you didn't like what happened, the original plan would have been something that many people, Cody Crybabies especially, would have absolutely hated. And one of his kind of points was that episode of SmackDown, when The Rock made his surprise appearance, the SmackDown after the Royal Rumble, when Cody Rhodes told Roman Reigns he was coming for everything, but he wasn't going to do it at WrestleMania, and then The Rock came out. Gewirtz said that things changed, and part of it was because Cody was supposed to be rah, rah, let's go, Rock, go get him. And instead, he left very sullenly. He left very sad. He looked back at the ring as if he was letting something go. And that wasn't part of the plan, and it changed things. He walked back that statement a little bit, but not entirely. Cody Rhodes was doing the podcast circuit. And he said, when asked about this, that he found out that it was a possibility that regardless of him winning the Royal Rumble or not, Rock versus Roman may be where they go for WrestleMania. That was a very real possibility. He said he found that out the day of the Rumble. And he said, how could he complain? He's winning the Royal Rumble, but talk about your all-time highs and your all-time lows. Now, it still doesn't exactly explain why he pointed at Roman Reigns after winning the Royal Rumble. There have been a lot of people obviously talking about this conversation happening, why it's happening, what it means, and taking a lot of it at face value, going, we now know this was the plan. We now know that was the plan. I may be in my world of following the 3 rules of Notsam Wrestling too much. Watch the product, which is what we're talking about. Speculate wildly, which is what we're doing. And everything counts. To me, the more I think about it, right, because Brian Gewirtz is a very smart guy who knows professional wrestling better than just about anybody. Cody Rhodes is a very smart guy who knows professional wrestling better than just about anybody. The Rock is a very smart guy who knows professional wrestling more than just about anybody. I've listened to the specific words that are being said. And what made Rock, Roman versus Cody, Seth, leading to Roman versus Cody so special, what made the build for WrestleMania 40 so special, was that it didn't just feel like wrestling was cool. It felt like wrestling was real. There were these blurred lines that we couldn't tell where the story ended and reality began. And I think that what we're seeing is, months removed from WrestleMania, some breadcrumbs being dropped. I come from the world of everything counts. And I'm not saying that there's some master plan, right? That there is a concrete booking in effect. This is what is happening at WrestleMania. Let's start building right now. Here is your assignment. Brian Gewirtz, you go do this. Cody, you do that. But wrestling people are very intelligent. And in their blood, they're promoters. They're working. There's multiple reasons why everything is done and everything is said. And to me, I feel like all parties involved are dropping breadcrumbs to make sure that whatever's going on television with Cody Rhodes and whatever's going on in Hollywood and on Instagram with The Rock, that tension still exists. That tension still exists in the minds of us wrestling fans. So that now we're putting the work in a year in advance to make sure that the match The Rock comes back for is the match that everyone's asking for. I think that we may be being breadcrumbed by all parties involved to keep that Cody Rhodes versus The Rock match in our heads. I don't think we're getting Cody versus The Rock at SummerSlam. I think that what parties involved would like to happen might be Cody versus The Rock at WrestleMania. And in order for that to be as big as possible, let's just continuously, every few months, drop a little something the same way after the night after WrestleMania. The Rock said goodbye, but he's coming back and he's coming for you. Cody has mentioned that The Rock gave him a gift. Cody has mentioned the final boss or the Rock returned a gift that he had given to him. But that answer was never given. In the meantime, we have to move on to something else. In the meantime, we have to go on to Logan Paul or AJ Styles or whatever it is. But let's not forget over here while we're listening to this podcast. Let's not forget over here while we're talking to our friends. Let's not forget over here while we're reading wrestling Twitter. There's tension between Cody and The Rock. And that tension is something that we should try to see come to a head so that by the time we get to January, February, March, and The Rock and Cody Rhodes are face to face, we know that there's real animosity here. And that is something that I am absolutely looking forward to. I said at the top of the show that what is making this summer so special is that you've got two wrestling promotions that are both going in, jumping right into the deep end, putting both feet forward and going, this is what we got. And we saw that over the weekend, not only with King and Queen of the Ring, but with AEW's Double or Nothing show. To me, the biggest moment of the show, and I don't want to use the word highlight because there were many highlights. AEW doesn't miss when it comes to pay-per-views. So many good matches. But to me, the big deal was right after the second match. It was after Roderick Strong had lost the title, the International Championship, to Will Ospreay, which was a great match. I love the, right before the end of the match where it just felt like Will Ospreay and Roddy Strong were just kind of throwing everything they possibly had at each other. And eventually Will Ospreay is able to win the International Championship. But after that match, Adam Cole comes out. He surprises everybody. And at first I go, is he going to make an announcement? Is he going to announce that he's going to be in the Owen Hart tournament? Is he going to announce that he's cleared? But he just starts cutting a heel promo. I go, that's weird. And then boom. Well, and then he starts holding the devil mask, you know what I mean? Acknowledging the devil mask. And I went, oh my goodness, no way, no way. And the lights go down. And the video comes up on the Tron, and you're walking through what looks like a palatial Long Island mansion. And the camera, first person, walks in to what appears to be a trophy room, and we realize this is MJF's trophy room. I loved the trophy room scene. This is, if you want to take notes on how we tell stories, if we want to take notes on how we build a foundation for characters, if you want to take notes on how we live in an era where everything counts, just watch this 30-second video when he just pans around the trophy room. And not only do you see the suit, not only do you see the scarf, but look at what he's got. He's got the dog collar from the dog collar match with CM Punk. We don't talk about CM Punk anymore, but he's got the dog collar because that was an important match. He's got the oxygen tank from the Iron Man match with Bryan Danielson. Of course, the ring is on display. He's got a Nightmare Family t-shirt. Nightmare Family, Cody Rhodes? Yep. He's part of it. It's his real history. He's got a Nightmare Family t-shirt right there. When you go to it, not only is there a suit kind of on display, that red suit, but in the background, you see the white tuxedo. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the tuxedo that he wore when he did the musical number with Chris Jericho, which some people loved and some people didn't love, but a huge point in MJF's career right there in that trophy room on display for the world. He had the remnants of his rivalries with Cody Rhodes, CM Punk, Chris Jericho, Bryan Danielson, and Wardlow with the ring. It was all right there. And then what did he pull out of the suit pocket? The ripped up picture between him and Adam Cole, symbolizing that that was the next thing that was going to be put into the trophy room. And I go, no way. And there's an orchestral theme playing of MJF's song. And then, boom, the music drops. And here comes MJF. Now, I want to tell you a story. In 2002, I sat in Madison Square Garden. And I had remembered months and months earlier, 7, 8, 9 months earlier, Triple H had been part of a group called the Two-Man Power Trip with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He had been an absolute villainous villain. And in a tag team match, he tore out both of his quads and he had to go away. When Triple H went away over those months, we were all reminded of the fact that while Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and The Undertaker and Kane and all these larger-than-life people were running at the top of sports entertainment, it was Triple H who had walked into the WWE as a Greenwich blue blood with a red coat on and a riding crop. And somehow, that guy who had tied his blonde hair back in a ribbon, somehow that guy had just proven the doubters wrong and won fans over and convinced the world that he was a top-tier guy, that he was a main event level guy. Sometimes when the journey is happening, as you're watching, you don't realize it's happening until it goes away from you and you have a chance to reflect on it and you go, oh my God, he really did do that. And why did he do that? Because he loves this stuff. Nobody has given more, we thought to ourselves, than that guy. And we were reminded of it by the fact that it was almost taken away from him because of this injury. And then we start watching these videos. U2's It's a Beautiful Day is playing. And he's doing the most strenuous physical therapy you've ever seen in your life. Building those quads back, getting bigger, getting stronger, getting faster. And the date flashes on. Triple H is back on this date in January of 2002 at Madison Square Garden. And I bought my tickets for it. I got tickets, 2 tickets to that Monday Night Raw in Madison Square Garden. I was probably sitting up in the 200s or the 300s. And I'll never forget going through the whole episode of Raw. And then at the very end of the show, right before the last commercial break, the image of Triple H came on. The game is next. And Triple H comes out. Boom, boom. Time to play the game. And the loudest reaction that I have ever heard inside Madison Square Garden, louder than the reaction that John Cena got in the same building when he returned early as a surprise for the Royal Rumble. The loudest reaction I've ever heard in Madison Square Garden. Surrounded me as I was a part of it. And I witnessed Triple H returning in all of his glory. This heel had somehow, by allowing us to miss him, become the biggest babyface in the company. And how did he mark the fact that this was the new Triple H? That the new Triple H that was here, bigger, stronger, faster, ready to take no prisoners and grab the industry by the throat. That new Triple H came out wearing a denim jacket. It was like a vest that was cut off with a leather jacket underneath. That iconic Triple H look, where it's the full leather jacket and then the denim vest, the jacket with the cut-off sleeves pulled over it. That was Triple H's return look. Okay? When MJF sat in the Notsam studio, you remember it was a great interview. If for some reason you haven't seen it, it's a classic. It's a classic Notsam interview. But when MJF sat in this room, he put Triple H on Mount Rushmore. He talked about how Triple H was, one of the greatest villains of all time. And how did MJF come back to AEW? With the Burberried Triple H leather jacket and denim vest. Any wrestling fan knows Triple H's return is the best return from injury that has probably ever happened. It is the best case scenario. It is what you want every time you hear a star has gone out with an injury. And when done properly, it's what is possible. That is what MJF was summoning when he walked to the ring wearing a leather jacket and a denim vest pulled over it and the Burberry pattern in the back. He said that unlike anybody else in the locker room, MJF made MJF. All the other stars were made somewhere else. But MJF made MJF. He pulled up his pant leg. This was, of course, after he low-blowed Adam Cole and suplexed him hard. Got him out of the ring. Let the audience know MJF made MJF. Showed off his new tattoo that he got on his lower leg. A little poker chip that said AEW on it and some scrolls around it that said, bet on yourself. As if there was any doubt. He said he was staying in AEW. He referred to himself as the Wolf of Wrestling and said, I'm not fucking leaving. And the crowd goes wild. Here's the question. Is there any way that MJF exists outside of a main event? Is there any way? I mean, I understand that MJF's got unfinished business with Adam Cole in the Undisputed Kingdom. But realistically speaking, AEW's already come under some scrutiny for the fact that Swerve hasn't been that sort of main event, tippy top of the conversation guy since winning the AEW championship. At Double or Nothing, he didn't go on last. Now, I wouldn't have wanted to follow Anarchy in the Arena, so I don't blame it, but it is what it is. What are we going to do? How are you going to convince me that there's an opponent for Swerve that is more interesting than MJF coming back and trying to take the title from Swerve? I'm all ears. I'd love to hear it. Because ideally, you're talking about Wembley, right? They said, I think that the winner of the Owen Hart tournament gets to go to Wembley to face the champion. So ideally, I would think Will Ospreay is going to win that Owen tournament and as the international champion go and face Swerve for the AEW title in London. Ospreay should be the challenger for that title in London, and Swerve deserves to be the defending champion. Look, maybe you're just going to have some hella compelling story. and you can give me an amazing world title scene and a hella compelling story. And if you can do that, and maybe you can, then you could end up with a scenario where Will Ospreay beats Swerve at Wembley. And now you've got Ospreay. And now you got Will Ospreay versus MJF coming off of Wembley. It's not bad. It's not bad. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, but I'm excited for it. Elsewhere on the show, of course, you had Toni Storm beating Serena Deeb. Adam Copeland in the barbed wire cage match, which wouldn't be the craziest match, by the way. A match full of tables and barbed wire and blood and all kinds of stuff. Wouldn't be the craziest match on the show. But, of course, the door ends up getting open. House of Black shows up. At one moment, we think that the House of Black is going to side with Adam Copeland. They turn on him. Now Adam Copeland is in a 3-against-1 scenario. What happens? Versions of the Brood kind of lighting and music play without it actually being Brood music. And Gangrel appears from under the ring, cuts through the canvas, enters the ring, helps Cope take out the House of Black, and just as the House of Black is getting the upper hand on Gangrel, a spear hits Malachi Black. Adam gets him in the submission move, and Malachi Black goes out. Adam Copeland retains the TNT Championship with the help of Gangrel. I say the TNT Championship because, of course, the TBS Championship was decided between Mercedes Moné and Willow Nightingale, and I think that Mercedes and Willow actually over-delivered, even with high expectations. I thought it might have been my favorite, as far as just straight matches go, that might have been my favorite just straight regular wrestling match on the show. I thought that it felt real. It's almost a shame. I get it. Like, Willow's beloved. I get not turning her heel, but it's almost a shame that Chris Statlander turned on her. Because I see a world where, like, Willow Nightingale can evolve into a female Vader. And I mean Vader in his prime. I mean Japan Vader. I mean Vader versus Sting Vader. I mean that Vader. And we got time. That can still happen. But we had Willow Nightingale. She would have beaten Mercedes. However, the referee was distracted because of what we thought was a boneheaded move by Chris Statlander and Stokely Hathaway. But who knows, because then the referee turns around, wasn't able to get the 3 count. Mercedes is able to take advantage. Mercedes Moné wins the TBS Championship from Willow. And then after the match, Chris and Stokely turn on Willow. So going forward, we've got some kind of rivalry between Willow and Chris Statlander, managed by Stokely, which will be good. I think, I don't know. I mean, I think they're both fairly beloved. So I guess I can't say I'd love for the roles to be reversed. I think I just fell in love with the idea of Willow as like this Vader type. But as physical as Willow got with Mercedes, I feel like now that there's this sort of personal animosity rivalry going into this thing, that we're going to see a really cool version of Willow. It was an excellent match. And I'm interested to see where Mercedes goes from here. I'm interested to see who lines up to be her next opponent. I hope she goes heel. I think she's like kind of playing that tweener game right now. I think she's got to go full heel. I think the fans are ready to boo her. I think they wanted to boo her, but they knew that she, you know what I mean? Like, there were some fans booing her for sure. But I think the audience is ready to rain boos on her as her character would dictate. And I hope that that's where it's going. You had Swerve retaining over Christian. And then, of course, Anarchy in the Arena, which was absolute insanity. I did very much love the beginning, the battle of the theme songs, where it was like, I don't know if it was Darby's song to start, and then the Bucks had their song put on, and then Bryan Danielson had Final Countdown put on, but then the Bucks stopped it and said that it was it was costing too much in royalties. I will say, anybody that tries to not give Paul Heyman his due, and the fact that his fingerprints are on everything, If that didn't bring you back to the days of New Jack, I don't know what will. But just absolute insanity. You had Darby Allin wearing like a nose protector that had thumbtacks on it. At one point, they said he got run over by a truck, except he was fine. So I don't think he actually got run over by that truck. I was kind of bummed out that there was no Shad Khan run-in, that Tony Khan's dad didn't run in. I feel like that's some long-term storytelling that needs to get paid off. He was on that episode where Tony got jumped. I knew something was up. So I figured that the flamethrower had to show up somewhere. For a second, I thought that maybe Darby was going to set the bus on fire that Jack Perry was driving. But then I saw Jack Perry when he showed up after, getting into the car accident, and then he was okay, except when he showed up backstage, he was like dripping in like gel. And I was like, I think they're going to set him on fire. Because you see him and you're like, there's no way he's that sweaty. It's not water. It's kind of staying on him. It looks a little heavy and viscousy. I think they're going to set that kid on fire. I was like, no way. He drags Tony Khan out. The Bucks are on the side of the stage doing something we can't tell. Luckily, it was getting fire extinguishers because Darby Allin has his flamethrower. And when Darby Allin showed up on the stage with his flamethrower, I went, oh my God, they're going to set Jack Perry on fire. And then they set Jack Perry on fire. They set Jack Perry, who was just wearing pants and boots, no shirt, beautiful long hair, and a long beard. They set the kid on fire. It was the damnedest thing. That probably should have been they probably should have ended it around there. That felt like the peak of the match, but they kept going. They hung up Darby by his ankles. They super kicked him with thumbtacks in their shoes. At the end of the day, Jack Perry ended up getting the pin victory. About 5 to 10 minutes after he got set on fire, as it turns out, he was okay. So I guess Jack Perry is fireproof. Anarchy in the arena is what anarchy in the arena is, and it very rarely leads to false advertising. A man got set on fire, and minutes later, he was fine and got the pinfall victory. So congratulations to Fireproof Jack Perry, which I hope is his new name. Spiky Shoes Young Bucks. For a second, I actually thought Darby Allin was going to get a pinfall victory over Okada, which would have been also nuts. But hey, a lot of nuts things are going on. We're going a little long, I feel like. We should talk about Liv Morgan, speaking of champions, winning the women's championship. Of course, the scandal continues with Liv Morgan. On Monday on Raw, she was seen like in the entry shots. Finn Balor got out of a car, and then Liv Morgan got out of the same car in a different shot. So clearly there's stuff going on. As we talked about on the King of the Ring breakdown show, Dominic confronted her on the Countdown show, saying, I'm here because I'm going to make sure that you don't win Mommy's title. She wins Mommy's title after he shows up, distracts Becky, and boom. Throws the chair in. She smashes Becky's face on the chair. Now Liv Morgan is the women's champion. I think it's a great thing. As I said, this is why all the questions, why would she win the Battle Royal? Because she was going to win the title later. But, so I kind of feel like eventually we're going to see Dominic go with Liv. I feel like it's inevitable for Dominic to maintain being a heel because he can't go babyface. And Rhea Ripley is Triple H when she returns. Rhea Ripley's a babyface coming home. So I feel like Dominic has to end up with Liv Morgan, and it's what everybody wants to see anyway. It's just too juicy. I said a long time ago that a custody of Dominic match at SummerSlam is, I think, inevitable. I don't know when Rhea Ripley's getting back, but also a part of me feels like, I think the turn, Dominic turning on Rhea Ripley and going with Liv Morgan should be something that probably happens in front of Rhea Ripley. It should not be something that happens while Rhea's gone. Because obviously Dominic is going to lose the Judgment Day when he goes with Liv Morgan. Damian Priest was already tweeting about how upset he was at what Dominic did. So I think that that's all got to happen around the same time. If Rhea Ripley is back before SummerSlam and it can lead to a SummerSlam match, like maybe after Money in the Bank, maybe Dominic sides with Rhea Ripley, with Liv Morgan at Money in the Bank. That's when Rhea Ripley comes back. The Judgment Day boots out Dominic. Dominic is with Liv Morgan. Now it's Liv versus Rhea Ripley in some kind of Dominic on a pole match. But the key is that in one fell swoop, you can get Dominic away from Rhea Ripley, but also have Damian Priest side with Rhea Ripley. And if Rhea Ripley casts Dominic out and Damian Priest sides with Rhea Ripley, well, now Damian Priest is a big-time good guy. And if you do that before SummerSlam, then that means Damian Priest can walk into SummerSlam as a big-time good guy and still be the world champion. And who is the villain that he could take on? Gunther. It all comes full circle here on Notsam Wrestling. Speaking of full circle, I was talking about after King of the Ring, how unhinged Michael Cole was. And I'm thinking, the more I think about it, right? Because I was thinking we're going to end up getting a Michael Cole-Logan Paul match. Now, I was facetious. I don't actually think we're going to get Logan Paul versus Michael Cole at SummerSlam. But, I was watching Corey Graves. He was holding Logan Paul back. I don't think we're going to get Logan Paul versus Corey Graves. Corey Graves is not Michael Cole's best friend on commentary. Corey Graves is not the guy who every single Monday night is having a bromance with Michael Cole. When you think about big matches you could do at SummerSlam, and I know we're already teasing LA Knight, but I'm just thinking big marquee matches that you could do at SummerSlam. We look at the world of boxing. What do we see? Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Two big names that you wouldn't even associate together colliding. And where can you see it? Netflix. That's the body that brings them together. Two big names. And what's the body that brings them together? WWE. Two big media superstars squaring off. And what's the body that could bring them together? WWE. Who are these media superstars? One is the guy that Michael Cole called a loser, Logan Paul. The other is Michael Cole's best friend, defending Michael Cole, Pat McAfee. What does the mainstream world say when the WWE announces Pat McAfee versus Logan Paul? The biggest name in sports broadcasting, the biggest name in internet broadcasting. Logan Paul versus Pat McAfee. I mean, this is something that it's one thing to say Logan Paul's come in and he's entered into this WWE world. So all the people who know who Logan Paul is, isn't it wild that he's in WWE? It's another thing to say Pat McAfee is in this WWE world. So all you guys that are Pat McAfee fans, how wild is it that Pat McAfee is involved in this wrestling thing? It's a third thing to say, hey, Pat McAfee fans, hey, Logan Paul fans, what would happen if our guys fought each other? What would happen if ESPN's Pat McAfee faced YouTube's Logan Paul in a WWE ring? It writes itself. Two of the most charismatic people on this planet. Maybe the two top celebrities to have ever been involved in wrestling. Definitely, I would say the two celebrities that picked up on it the quickest. Bad Bunny is jumping in there for number 3, I would say. But what about it? Where else can you see this? You talk about star power. Pat McAfee versus Logan Paul. To me, that's a stadium match. It's a stadium in Cleveland. Logan Paul's hometown. Might be perfect for it. Just saying. Could be good. We also, as I said on the King of the Ring show, no Uncle Howdy. I'm still thinking June 17th. June 17th, and as we're running a little late, I'm not going to go through everything with the QR codes, but it was hinted at June 17th. And as these QR codes continue, I'm sure we will find the time here on this show to do another QR code breakdown. But we got to do email breakdown. Email. If you want to talk to Not Sam Wrestling, you know what to do. Email notsamwrestling@gmail.com. That's notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Let's see here. Don't forget, by the way, we'll be in Cleveland, Ohio. We were talking about SummerSlam. Not Sam Wrestling will be live at Hilarities in Cleveland Thursday, August 1st, 7:30 p.m. That's the Thursday before SummerSlam. We'll be at Hilarities in Cleveland. A lot of you have already bought tickets. I really appreciate it. Go ahead, get those tickets right now. There's a link at notsam.com, and you can check it out. Let's start with Leah. Dear Not Sam, first time. Oh, this is from Nicholas. He's using Leah's email. Nicholas writes in. First time writing in, and I wanted to start by saying thank you for your insight and commentary. I'm fairly new to wrestling, and I've only started watching within the last year. I love that. So your show has been able to help me have some much-needed context. I love, by the way, people who've been watching wrestling for like a year or sometimes even less. And they like watch a show like this, and all of a sudden they're able to contextualize things in this whole new way. I feel like it makes a more serious fan. It's my duty. I wanted to ask what your thoughts were on Liv Morgan going further than just stealing Dominic from Rhea Ripley and instead possibly taking the whole Judgment Day or at least tearing it apart. During Monday's episode of Raw, when Lyra is shown entering the building at 5:13, we see Liv getting out of a black vehicle. Right. This is the vehicle thing I was talking about. While they're starting to fracture. Blah, blah. Okay, so I see what you're saying. And I'm not against it. Like, maybe Damian Priest goes babyface, stays with Rhea Ripley, but maybe Finn Balor and JD McDonough stay heel. And they're in this other, I don't want to go full bloodline, two factions. I'd probably just have Damian Priest do his own thing. Maybe the Judgment Day just becomes Finn Balor, JD McDonough, and Dominic Mysterio. I don't see the Liv Morgan Dominic thing being a long-term thing. That's the only thing. Like, I don't see Liv Morgan being a part of this new faction because she's just using him. But I could see Judgment Day kind of splintering and Liv being at the center of that, for sure. Like maybe Rhea thinks that she's just lost Dominic, but she's also lost JD. She's also lost Finn, but she hasn't lost Priest. Maybe something like that. I'm with it. I'm with it. Emily writes in, oh, this is Tay from the Bay. I got to stop reading these names on the email. Tay from the Bay. I'm so happy that you've gotten over your obsession with burning buildings to the ground. I haven't said, I just don't talk about it as much. I don't want the authorities listening. My question is, why every 10 years WWE can't get the WrestleMania main event right? For instance, they got WrestleMania 1 right with Hulk Hogan and Mr. T versus Paul Orndorff and Bob Orton. WrestleMania 10 main event was supposed to be Lex Luger versus Yokozuna, but they didn't have trust in him, so they gave it to Bret Hart. WrestleMania 20 main event was supposed to be Triple H versus He Who Shall Not Be Named, but they added Shawn Michaels to the mix. WrestleMania 30, Batista versus Randy Orton, but the people wanted Daniel Bryan instead. Finally, this past WrestleMania, Rock versus Roman, but again, it was changed. Well, it's interesting that does. I mean, it doesn't just happen on the 10s, right? Like WrestleMania 9, technically the main event was Bret Hart versus Yokozuna, but then they bring in Hulk Hogan, right? WrestleMania 13, main event was supposed to be Shawn versus Bret. It's Undertaker versus Sid. So it's happened before. WrestleMania 18, the main event probably should have been Hogan versus Rock. The main event was Hunter versus Jericho. So, I mean, I think it's a complicated thing, and everything is clearer in hindsight. But it is interesting that there is a pattern that develops, And who knows? Maybe the main event should have been. By the way, it was Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper with Bob Orton in their corner. Some would say that the main event for WrestleMania 1 should have been Hogan versus Piper. But it is interesting. It's worth bringing up. Quentin writes in, big fan, first time emailer. Been watching the pod since SummerSlam 2023. Okay. And watching weekly since Survivor Series and was watching Emergency Pod from Raw Day 1 to Mania. Help my semester at Q's go faster. I love anything that can help. If I'm helping you get through Syracuse from January to April, you have no idea what a compliment that is to me. I spent 4 January to Aprils in Syracuse. It is the longest January to April you can possibly have. Lake effect snow. It's no joke. I've been a wrestling fan since I was 10, on and off. NXT Black and Gold was my shit, and really only watched that. Anyway, the reason I'm emailing is that I think I solved the Punk problem for Drew. With him already getting the main event at Clash, and it's almost certain that Punk will try to cost Drew yet again. But this time, Drew is already ahead of Punk. And when CM Punk comes from under the ring or through the crowd and is about to cost Drew, 3 men appear and attack Punk, revealing themselves as Gallus. I know what you're probably thinking. Yeah, that makes sense in Scotland. Hometown boys all make sense. But what are the 3 rules of Notsam? Watch the product, everything counts, and speculate wildly. So who was the tag team that helped The Rock train for Mania? Gallus. And he gave them a shout out. And who was the person that broke the news that Drew had re-signed? The Rock. And with Gallus's new attitude since returning 2 weeks ago and taking out everyone, it seems logical. So maybe The Rock has his hands in more than just the bloodline. Okay. So a couple of things there. There's no way The Rock would get involved in that story. You know, like that's like, Rock's not getting involved in that story. Rock's got enough on his plate. I don't think so, dude. I mean, I get it, but like Drew versus Punk is white hot. Why would you throw Gallus in that mix? Gallus is doing their thing. I'm a big Gallus fan. Don't throw Gallus into it. Doesn't make any sense. Don't throw Gallus into it. Gran writes in, if you had to recruit 10 professional wrestlers to build a company, which 10 would you choose? You must include 3 Americans, 1 African-American, 1 Canadian, 1 Latin, 2 Europeans, and 2 Japanese. Okay. Off the top of my head, from anywhere, Roman Reigns. I'm just going to go in order. Okay. So 3 Americans. I guess Roman Reigns is an American, right? So Roman Reigns, the Usos. I'm just going to do men, so it's not complicated. Roman Reigns, the Usos, Obafemi, a Canadian. This isn't all time. Christian, that's good. Latin, Dominic Mysterio, obviously. 2 European, Ilya Dragunov and Gunther. And 2 Japanese, Okada and Shinsuke. There you go. That's my 10 superstars. You can email me again next week. I'll do women. CL writes in, it's Christian. I failed to email before King and Queen of the Ring to say I doubted Howdy or the Wyatt Six would appear there. Oh, I didn't email this in, but I knew they weren't going to show up. Sure, buddy, sure. As much as I doubted that the WWE would make that debut on a foreign premium live event. It's not. So you're saying that the only premium live event that Uncle Howdy can debut at is Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, or Survivor Series. We're not going to see it at Backlash because that's in France. We're not going to see it at King of the Ring because that's in Saudi. We're not going to see it in... we can't see it at Clash at the Castle. That's Scotland. We can't see it at Money in the Bank. That's Canada. So maybe SummerSlam. Okay, all right. I know there are no limits to WWE resources, but something still made me suspect that WWE would handle the logistics of a big faction debut like that. They literally flew Maxine Dupree over there with gold gloves and all to walk out on stage and then leave. You know? I did love the idea of the debut during the Paul Rhodes match. Dude, don't email after the fact and go, I was going to tell you this before. I don't like this email. I trust you, Christian. You're a good person. I like you. It's a ridiculous thing to email in and go, I knew it. See, I told you when you didn't tell me. It's annoying to do it when you did tell me. It's literally insane to do it when you didn't tell me. Floyd writes in, my pick for the men's Money in the Bank winner is main event Jey Uso. Me and you, especially after another high-profile loss to Gunther King of the Ring tournament. We're on the same page, homeboy. I imagine Drew McIntyre will beat Damian Priest in Scotland for the world title. No, he will not. So we could possibly have a situation where Jay is holding the briefcase and Drew's the world champion before SummerSlam. My question is, would 2 successful cash-ins on Drew in 1 year be too cruel? No. No. You're going to have Jay. So you're going to have between now. Okay, so this is what you're talking about. You're going to have in 2 months, right? Because we've got June and July, and then it's SummerSlam. So by your thing, you're going to have Damian Priest drop the title to Drew. Drew dropped the title to Jay. And in all likelihood, Jay dropped the title to Gunther. You can do 2 to 3 title changes within 2 months. That's the plan right now. That's what we're going to do. We're going to have Drew win in Scotland, and within 3 weeks, have a cash-in happen immediately. That's the plan? All right. P.S. Now that Carlito is a heel, he needs his old theme song back. He always needed his old theme song. His old theme song just is, it's a bop. Brian writes in, Dearest Samuel, with Sonya Deville returning on Raw last week, I need you to use your influence and power to make Sonya the new GM of Raw. Adam Pearce is clearly overwhelmed as GM of Raw. Contrast with the level-headed professional business decision that Nick Aldis makes on SmackDown. Pearce is emotional rash and has a propensity for drinking on the job. I don't know about that. Sonya has the experience and the decision-making skills Raw is missing. I need your influence as host of The Bump to make trips and make this happen. Seems like Sonya has some other plans in mind if we're watching the product. Raj from Queens writes in, happy belated 500th, major milestone. You probably already discussed what you're feeling, how you feel about 2-night SummerSlam, but I just wanted to share my thoughts with you. Oh, excuse me, Raj. I didn't realize this was not Raj Wrestling. I personally think that WrestleMania should be the only 2-night event of the year. Okay, all right, whatever. If a 2-night SummerSlam is a financial success, eventually the Royal Rumble and Survivor Series will follow suit. I understand this is the wrestling business and business is business, but when is too much, too much? WrestleMania is called the Super Bowl of wrestling for a reason. What do you mean? They don't call it that. They legally can't call it that. And by the way, the Super Bowl, okay, hang on. If you follow that model for other PLEs, you take away from the aura of WrestleMania. Rip me a new one if your opinion differs. This is not just for you, Raj. This is for everybody because everybody's saying this. Number one, the Super Bowl is the same length as every other game throughout the season. It's the same, which means that every game is the same length as the Super Bowl. And still, the Super Bowl is able to maintain a certain aura. So it has nothing to do with being the Super Bowl of wrestling. Number two, WrestleMania spent 35 years being a one-night show like every other show and still had the aura of WrestleMania. For most of those 35 years, it was an arena show. It didn't even take place in a stadium and still managed to maintain the aura of WrestleMania. As wrestling fans, there were a lot of people who didn't want a 2-night WrestleMania because they thought it would take away from the aura. They thought it would make it less special. If it's 2 nights of WrestleMania, it won't be as special. WrestleMania is just one big spectacle. It's the Super Bowl. Super Bowl is 1 night. WrestleMania is 1 night. And then WrestleMania is 2 nights, and it's good WrestleMania, good WrestleMania, good WrestleMania. So if we take that and go, well, if WrestleMania is, financially, obviously it's a success. But regardless of that, because who cares? We're not making that money. They are. But as fans, we've loved those WrestleManias. Then why would we sit there and go, I don't want to take a chance, though. I don't want to risk it. What if I don't love SummerSlam? Well, then whatever. Don't watch night 2. What do you want me to tell you? But there is no evidence. Again, I don't like pessimistic people. I don't like pessimism. I don't like it. There is no evidence that would tell you that it would take away from WrestleMania to have other shows be 2 nights. There's no evidence that would tell you that it would be too much. If anything, it worked once. So why not try it again? And if WWE knows it's happening, then they're going to go, hey, we don't need to sell 1 stadium full of seats. We need to sell 2 stadiums full of seats. We need to sell 100,000 tickets again. You know what we're going to have to do? Make awesome programming that people buy tickets for. And you know who benefits from awesome programming? Me and you, Raj, the two of us. Plus, it gives me a lot to talk about on the pod. Michael writes in, Sam, I hope you and the family are doing well. I appreciate that. I just saw the King and Queen of the Ring pay-per-view, or PLE, and including the pre-show match, which they should have more of. I liked that they had equal amount of matches for the men and the women, 3 and 3. Could you see WWE, if they wanted to do another all-women PLE, have it set in Jeddah? I don't know. I don't know that WWE would do another all-women PLE because I think they're more invested in making sure that everybody has great stories. You know, I think that they're all for putting more women's matches on shows, but I think that's because women deserve to have the matches on shows. I don't think that it's about, let's give the women a special night. I think that the women are some of the strongest performers on the roster, regardless of gender. So they end up in those big spots. So, you know, I mean, it could happen, but it could happen anywhere, I suppose. Andy from London, hope you and the family are doing great. Great PLE, and I'm very happy that Nia won. I think she's doing her best work right now. My question this week is, in this new era with long-term storytelling being key, do you think we'll see something similar to Kofi Mania / Yesomania during this era? Yes. I'm an optimist, so I'm hoping we do without getting someone injured in the build-up to Mania. I would love to get your thoughts on this. Yes, we did this year at WrestleMania with Cody. Yes, of course. It happened. I don't know if you noticed it, but it totally happened. There was a guy, his name's Cody Rhodes. He would look like he wasn't going to be in the main event for WrestleMania. They were going to replace him with this other guy named The Rock. And then all the fans got real upset. So they switched it, and the fans were able to get Cody into the main event of WrestleMania, and he ended up winning the title. He called it finishing the story. So, yeah, that happened. Mike writes in, Sam, hope you and the family are well. We're getting some good wishes for the family. Wanted to comment on the amount of matches and PLEs lately and pick your brain about it a little more. Okay, I know you've said you like only 5 matches and that it gives those matches more time and such. I just feel like it takes the excitement out of it for me. Okay. Firstly, I don't think all the matches need to be so long. Some of them drag. For example, my buddy texted me earlier and told me Orton's entrance was long. I'm just now getting to watch and remembering that I decided to time him on my phone. 6 minutes and 12 seconds. LOL what? Like, why fill time? Why not just add 2 to 3 more matches? Anyway, don't you think having 2 or 3 more matches would be okay? The actual King and Queen of the Ring PLE was only 2.5 hours. I mean, you could add another 45 minutes with a couple more matches. I don't think that is all that excessive. What do you think, man? I just don't. I think that it's a refreshing change of pace. I think that you have to take into account that we're in a period right now, and I don't mean like an era, I mean a time of year, where there's a pay-per-view every 3 weeks, right? You're talking about going into Backlash. 3 weeks after that is King, Queen of the Ring. 3 weeks after that is Clash at the Castle. 3 weeks after that is Money in the Bank. Then 4 weeks to SummerSlam. Then 3 or 4 weeks until Bash in Berlin. So the idea of Big Deal will do 8-match pay-per-views that are 3 hours, 3.5 hours each, and we'll do it every 3 weeks. That's like where it's like, all right already. I don't think there's anything wrong if you're getting a pay-per-view every 6 weeks and they're short. But I mean, like, look, NXT at its peak, when it was in that takeover era, those takeovers were like 2.5 hours long, 5 matches. They smoked. I think WWE is finding a comfortable middle ground. They're doing these big international spectacle shows that are 2.5, 3 hours long, putting on matches that every single one has meaning, every single one is important, then getting out the door. And then 4 or 5 times a year, having a big knockdown drag out that's going to go longer. Royal Rumble was way too long this year. WrestleMania was both nights I thought were the appropriate length. But yeah, I mean, I think, about the length of a football game is about the length that these shows should be. Otherwise, they get long. And you want to talk about filler? Oh, who needs all this filler? Randy's entrance was great. They were all singing along. And I'd rather have a couple minutes of extra entrance than like filler matches to just be put on. That's the last. A filler match is way worse than having an entrance that's a little long. Because if you have a match that you start to feel like, oh, this is a filler match, well, now you're doing a disservice to the people involved in that match, because as a fan, you're not really going to look at them as you're looking at them as filler now. And that's a terrible way to be looked at when you're a performer. Everybody should be looked at as a huge superstar on these shows. And the way you do that is make every match special. It's a philosophy, you know? I get it. Joe writes in, you were right about Dominic helping Liv. I wonder if her winning maybe Mommy is closer to returning than we all think. Second, all the matches were straight bangers. That goes back to my point. Third, wasn't surprised we didn't get Uncle Howdy, King, Queen of the Ring. I think WWE is going to avoid doing anything dark and demonic over there. I mean, that's literally where The Fiend won the world title. So, I mean, you got to look at history. You can't just be running around making statements. That's where The Fiend won the Universal Championship. So, boom. Roasted. Last email of the day comes from, this isn't the last one. Alfredo writes in, is SummerSlam 2 nights because WrestleMania 42 will be in England? No. I mean, I have no idea, but they literally, Nick Khan said in an interview, the idea is to do the big 4 pay-per-views in America and all the other pay-per-views internationally. So, I don't know. I mean, it could be. How do I know? But no, I don't think that that's why at all. Here, Caden writes in, hope all is well. I just wanted to ask you about this for Double or Nothing. Do you think Will Ospreay will beat Roderick Strong? It already happened, dude. And if so, will the AEW International title and the World title be unified at a future AEW pay-per-view, perhaps All In? Okay, all right, that I will take. That's a good last question. Yes, and I kind of hinted at this as we were going over the pay-per-view, but I think that, I think the move for Will Ospreay is to put himself in the Owen Hart tournament as the international champion, to win the tournament, and then to go as the international champion and go title for title with Swerve and unify the belts and get rid of the international title. Have him beat Swerve, win the AEW championship, and eliminate the international title. That's exactly the way I would take it. But hey, I'm just me. You're just you. I appreciate you so much for tuning in to another episode of Notsam Wrestling. Hopefully I will see you in Cleveland. Get those tickets at notsam.com. And we'll talk again very, very soon. Subscribe on YouTube. Leave comments, leave reviews, leave the whole deal. Hit like, do the thing. You know how to do things on the internet, right? Do those things on the internet. Thanks, everybody.